Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in for today's webinar, wherein we'll be showcasing how you can build a business case on AP automation. Specifically, how you can determine the ROI and what are the KPIs which you can measure. So before I start today's webinar, I would just like to go through the basic housekeeping items for today's webinar is. So this webinar, we'll be recording this session. We'll be sending you the recorded session before the, after the webinar is closed. And also, if there are some things which we missed out, feel free to reach us to the email address mentioned at contact@aavenir.com. And also don't forget to follow us on our social media channels, especially the LinkedIn, wherein we are sharing daily product and new features on AP automation. So with that, I would like to introduce the speakers of today's session, starting with Rohit, who's the Director of Product Management at Aavenir, who will be taking us in explaining the challenges which the AP teams generally face, with wherein Russell will also help him, who is the account executive at Aavenir, and he will be sharing what are the KPIs, which typically the 5 best KPIs which the team needs to measure. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Rohit to start the webinar. Rohit, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Maddie, and thank you everyone for joining us in today's webinar on KPIs, ROI, and building the business case for AP automation. So recently we had engaged with a US-based organization or the manufacturing company. They wanted to digitize 5,000 invoices every month. They clearly understood the challenges, the different benefits, and kind of figured out the roadmap of the solution they wanted. But they had a critical hurdle of getting the software approved or the budget approved by the executive team. So they wanted to prepare the business case, and so we are going to walk through all the steps we took while preparing the business case for the executive team. Now, we do understand that preparing a business case is critical for any digital transformation journey. We know the different challenges. So with that, let's talk on the key steps in building a business case, where you always start with the current state of the organization, identify the key challenges unique to your organization, and most importantly, you talk with people that what are the key stories, what are the KPIs, and how organization will measure in terms of the needs. Then you kind of tailor your message for the stakeholders. The stakeholder could be in the finance team, procurement team, or the IT team. Based on that, you define the roadmap of it could be in the future roadmap or the maturity model of AP automation, and that is relevant for the strategic goals in your organization. So most importantly, you try to identify what kind of standards or benchmarks you want to achieve with AP automation. And with that, you start identifying the financial savings, the intangible and the tangible benefits in AP automation. Once you have done that, you will try to calculate the ROI of your investment in AP automation. So it's really helpful with that. In terms of numbers, you can easily prove the business case to any stakeholder in the organization. With that, let's talk about the key challenges. Now, this is a snapshot of the key challenges or pain points identified in a survey of different organizations. This is the raw data. To simplify it, most of the challenges can be categorized into problems in manual invoice processing, invoice discrepancies or invoice frauds, spend visibility within the organization, and most importantly, collaboration. Why a lack of workflow is hindering or causing problems to each of the stakeholders or to the AP team. So those are the key problems that each organization wants to solve. And those challenges, they try to communicate to all the important stakeholders in the organization. Talking of stakeholders, whenever you talk to a specific stakeholder, the first question is, Why do you want to change it? AP process is working fine. The AP team is doing great. They are the best people in the world. Why do you want to change it? So you need to tailor your message for each stakeholder, and how the KPIs can help improve the organization, basically can improve the strategic goal or achieve the strategic goals in your organization. So when you reach out to a CFO or the finance team, you talk about the cost, the savings, and you need to portray that AP automation is a revenue generator, like capturing the discounts and making more benefits out of that. So you start with projected cost and then try to tell that how you're going to process those invoices and how many errors you're going to reduce. Now, when you reach to procurement, you would try to ensure that the approval process can be improved. You will talk about how the validation can be improved. So eventually you want to tell that how AP automation can help you improve spends and improve supplier management. Now, finally, when you reach to IT, they're going to ask how the solution will look like in future, or how the solution will be compliant with IT policies. So you need to put that message, and you need to ensure that the solution can be scalable and it maximizes the investment. And eventually that AP automation fits into the IT strategy of achieving a unified digital platform. And that brings us to the poll question. Now, the question is like, in your organization, which AP technology is used to process the invoices? So you would be getting the responses. I'll take a couple of seconds to wait for the response. Okay, so can I see the poll responses? Awesome. So it's evenly distributed, that manual processing, e-invoicing, custom built AP solution. So you have multiple solutions to manage the AP or the invoice processing. Considering that, let me bring in the most critical section of this webinar, the KPIs and the different benchmarks in AP automation. Russell, over to you.
Thank you, Rohit. So let's start off with a quote I always like to. So Peter Drucker, he was a management consultant, really a business philosopher in many senses, and he had a timeless quote quite relevant here: what gets measured gets improved. So we're taking you on the journey of planning for and building a business case for accounts payable. We've already discussed some of the key challenges that we see across the industries, and also some of the stakeholders who you might be engaging with in your organization who will be experiencing these challenges. So now we're going to outline some of the key performance indicators that you can start measuring today to get a clear understanding of how efficiently your AP operations are running. Best-in-class organizations are outperforming their counterparts in many of these critical functions. So we're going to have a look at some of these areas, discuss why they're important, and how you can measure your team's performance against the industry benchmarks. So as with any journey, it's best to start with a roadmap. And this diagram here, Rohit referred to it earlier, is what we call the maturity model. You can think about this as a spectrum of operational excellence, if you want to. Really, it's just an identification of where you land in the maturity of your AP operations, right? The most basic foundational items that are core to this are closer to the bottom, and more advanced items for higher performing teams are further up. So consider your company. Ask yourself, where are we at on this spectrum? Have you moved to mostly digital invoice processes? If not, that's probably where you want to start. Consider all of the steps that go into these various items, and drop a pin on this map somewhere to where you think you are today as it relates to the maturity of the model. There is no right or wrong answer, but identifying your current state of maturity gives you a great idea of where you're at and what's going to be next in your path forward. So moving on to the actual KPIs, this is a helpful chart that identifies some of the critical indicators within the realm of AP. And more importantly, it notes the industry benchmarks compared to top performing companies. So just pay close attention to the second and third column. The industry leaders who have well-oiled AP machines supported by modern technology have created a significant performance gap between themselves and the industry benchmarks. In particular, look at the first two rows. Industry leaders are processing invoices 3 times faster at a fraction of the cost. These are perhaps the 2 best indicators of your overall health and performance. Now let's unpack a couple of these critical ones in a bit more detail. So the first KPI I'll talk on is the invoicing lead time. Lead time, of course, is just the amount of time it takes to process an invoice from receipt to submission for remittance. This is important because it's one of the biggest contributors to the cost per invoice. And that's really a good way to start thinking about this. What is your true cost per invoice? And some items that might influence the lead time are complicated routing processes or delays in capturing approval. If a large number of your invoices have exceptions and need to be handled in a special way, and manual data extraction is another key extender of the invoice lead time. Now, this not only impacts your cost of operations, but these elongated process cycles can lead to late payment penalties as well as missed opportunities for early payment discounts. So it's kind of a nightmare scenario that as you're paying the bills, you're costing yourself more money, but that's a real reality that many companies are facing today. I would say perhaps the most direct way to reduce the lead time is with technology. Modern solutions can reduce the time demand at every step of the cycle, which we're going to outline a bit further in a couple of slides. And this is a big win, not only for the staff level AP clerks, but also for financial leadership as well, reducing cost of operations, reducing lead times. Of course, that's an appealing proposition to several stakeholders. Next KPI we'll talk about is cost per invoice. And I said a moment ago, this is a great way to start thinking about this in general, as cost is really, it's a primary metric for any operations evaluation. The primary factor I think that could be most directly reduced is labor cost, the labor cost for processing each invoice. Now, automation tools to route invoices and capture approval, especially those that have image scanning tools to really reduce the need for manual data management. They can cut down the labor demand by as much as 75% when it comes to processing each individual invoice. Now, I think the goal for any AP organization should be for AP clerks ultimately working as exception handlers as opposed to data jockeys, right? I think best in class firms are auto posting touchless invoices at a much, much higher rate than the industry benchmarks. And this is really, it's a primary mechanism for keeping costs down. So understanding your current cost per invoice is a really critical starting point. And success in your AP automation journey will very, very often be measured as a reduction in this number. So another thing to keep in mind, however, cost is kind of a lagging indicator. That is to say, the changes that you make to your processes and tools will have an impact to this, but it's generally a metric that you're going to be looking backwards at, right? Looking backwards at what your costs were over the last month, over the last quarter. So you want to make sure that you're taking decisive actions to influence this, and then you'll be measuring success in the future. Next KPI, I want to talk about our process, invoices processed per FTE. Really, this is just a measurement of the efficiency of the AP staff. You can see the industry standards as compared to top performing companies leveraging automation tools. That's a really wide margin. Even just 3,000 to 5,000 invoices per month, the industry standard is quite a wide margin. And the difference in that margin is really, it's a direct impact on your cost of operations, right? More efficient clerks essentially are producing processed invoices at a much faster rate. And to really, carry on with the theme of the material, modern technology can dramatically improve the overall efficiency of your accounts payable staff. You can really think about AP automation tools as a turbocharger for your accounts payable clerks. They're designed to supplement the most time-consuming parts of the job with a processing engine. And with that in mind, it's not unrealistic to see a 4 to 5x improvement in the amount of invoices per FTE when you're arming the team with best of breed technology. And the last KPI we'll touch on in depth here is the exception rate. So exceptional invoices are, those that need to be processed outside of the typical workflow. Some common examples are like a clerical error, if there's a zip code or a PO number typed in incorrectly on the invoice, or some invoices don't have POs at all, need to go through their own separate approval process. Maybe you get a duplicate invoice. There's a countless amount of examples that could lead to invoice exceptions. I think a key takeaway is that invoice exceptions really come in two types: the type that you simply can't avoid, and the type that can be remedied by better processes and tools, right? So naturally, some invoices are just a byproduct of the goods or services you're procuring. They're just going to have to be handled a special way, right? Services invoices, for instance, might go through a special process because there's no PO. These are the cases where your AP staff should be spending most of their time on the naturally occurring exceptional invoices. The other type, the clerical errors, the duplicate invoices, all of those should be flagged by software that can identify that there's an error of some sort and this needs human attention, as opposed to relying on people to go through and manually find all of those. This can significantly reduce the demand of human labor, to human intervention, and it can also significantly reduce the amount of actual invoice exceptions. As you can see, the industry standards, about a quarter of invoices are, some sort of exception, and with the appropriate tooling, that number can be cut in half. So, do a quick recap. We discussed some of the typical challenges organizations are facing in AP processing, also some of the key stakeholders involved, as well as some of the KPIs that you can start measuring today to assess your own efficiency and begin really planning your own journey. So, we've discussed what the problem is, whose problem it is, and how we can measure the problem. Now let's shift our focus towards solutions and benefits. So the modern finance team is really viewing accounts payable automation as a necessity rather than a luxury. It's kind of been a shift in paradigm, I think, in recent years. The perspective of the AP team is being viewed less as a traditional back office function, really more as an intelligent hub that has a bunch of critical financial data. So let's talk about solutions and how we can arm the team with the appropriate tooling to capitalize on this critical financial data. So any accounts payable automation tool is going to be a big improvement from manual processing. But for optimal results, really, you want to find something that's end-to-end and covers the entire spectrum. Aavenir Invoiceflow it's a great example of this. If you look at the 4 boxes that kind of outline the invoice workflow on the diagram here, each of these feature their own time-consuming tasks and steps and manual heavy lifting. So leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning and document scanning technology, Invoiceflow is really designed to rapidly increase the speed with which you can receive and process your invoices, right? So no more opening every attachment, copying data into a spreadsheet or a separate system, manually checking the data matches your other records. All of this can be automated with technology that's available today. Now, Invoiceflow is also built on the ServiceNow platform, which is really the perfect system to automate routing and approvals and also to connect with back-end financial systems for payment submission, right? So the technology here seamlessly manages collecting and processing, leverages workflows to expedite the process and ultimately produce fully approved, ready to pay invoices. This is what we call a touchless invoice process, from submission to remittance with really little to no human interaction. And in general, up to 75% of your invoices could be getting processed and posted in this capacity with little or no human intervention. So at this point, I want to pass it back to Rohit. We're going to explore some ROI calculation and how you can assess the impact that implementing a solution like this can have on the organization. So Rohit, I'll stop sharing.
Sure. Thank you, Russell, for sharing those insights and talked about the KPIs, the different industry standards. And so far we have talked about the challenges. Now, based on those KPIs and different industry standards, we have tried to bring it all together in terms of an ROI calculator. And as you can calculate the ROI, the different savings in dollar value or in terms of time. So this ROI calculator has been based on the industry standards earlier and also some of the benchmark figures that might be relevant for your organization. So what you can do is you can just put in the input data. That means you put in data like your current organizational spend, how many invoices you're processing currently, how many employees work in the EP department, and then probably the cost of scanning the invoices and storing those invoices. Based on the input data, you get the eventual savings you're going to achieve. So what you see on the right-hand side are the savings with the input data of $70 million and for 50,000 invoices that are processed by 5 employees in your EP department. So the expected savings in year 1 is going to be around $1 million, and the expected ROI is coming near about 615%. So let's break down how the savings are going to be achieved. So what you can see is that time saving. This is how your EP team or your employees are going to save times probably in not matching or not entering the data, and then trying to identify the approvals and spending times in a PO matching, scanning. So you're going to save eventually those time. Once that is done, how the time translates into cost. So this is how all the time that is saved, like 305 days, is going to translate into the cost savings of around $100,000. And then you have different intangible benefits that comes in, like the penalties you're going to pay, the late penalties for each invoices. Then you have different discount that you can achieve from the invoices. So you have improved spend visibility, and that comes around to $1 million in year 1 itself. So once you have done that, you also have something like rebates, because you would like to achieve what is based on the payment terms. You might have some rebates or based on and also on the taxes. So eventually it's like you're going to save $1.35 million in terms of savings, and that translates into multiple benefits. Now, once you have entered the data, what happens next? You can download a detailed report that captures the input data and also the savings. And then it's in a ready to use format, and that you can present to the key stakeholders. And that includes something like the graph, and it talks about all the savings in time, the dollar value, and you can reposition it the way you want to put in the for the stakeholders. So far we have put in the ROI, and we have given all the talk of how it might be helpful. So at Aavenir, we have also put in different resources to prepare the business case. So we have different resources like ROI calculator that you saw earlier, and we have a ready to use RFP template for accounts payable. So you just have to make changes in terms of adding your organization name, or what are the different challenges, or what are the key terms that are specific to your organization, and it's a ready to use RFP template. Now, for bias checklist, this guide is helpful in evaluating how the buyers are comparing in terms of the features, or in terms of the value given to your organization. So all those resources you can see on our website, avenir.com. With that, time for some questions.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions, Rohit and Russell. So the first question for today is, how many KPIs does the Invoiceflow solution monitors?
Let me take this one then. So it captures around the 4 KPIs that we saw. And so that comes out of the box, and again, you get all the data for different KPIs. And probably I think the touchless invoicing part is also achieved. Like you talk about how it moves from 0% to 20%. So you also have those slider coming in while using the ROI calculator.
Okay. The next question is related to ServiceNow. So does invoice flow, how can the existing ServiceNow users start using invoice flow? Is there an app available, or what's the general process? That is the first question. And the second question is how much time does it take to implement the invoice flow solution for AP automation?
Sure. So let me take the first question of how this application works. So most of the organizations have ServiceNow instance, or they have their own ServiceNow platform. So you can download the invoice flow application, bring it to your instance and apply your different workflows and different validations rules. And since you already have your organizational hierarchy or the employee hierarchy, it's very easy to implement after that, because you just have to pull the data from your ServiceNow to this application. It's kind of like an Android app store where you download a Aavenir application on your phone or on your ServiceNow instance.
And when we talked about earlier appealing to different stakeholders, this is a very appealing proposition to the IT group specifically, as this is a native extension of a platform that's generally already in place. If you've already got ServiceNow, this is a great way to add additional functionality for a critical business operation, leveraging a platform that's already been vetted out, already been invested in. So when we were talking earlier, what does IT care about? Scalability of a solution, how it fits into the technology strategy. This is a very important consideration in those regards.
Okay, great.
And there was a part 2 to that question, Maddie, am I right? How long does it take to normally set this up?
Correct, yeah.
I think a general rule of thumb would be up to a couple of months. Really, with these sorts of projects, it varies on a case-by-case basis, but the out-of-the-box processing, for receiving your invoices and leveraging AI, all of that stuff is already built and established. It's as simple as putting it into your ServiceNow environment. And then, identifying your specific workflows for approvals and for PO matching, things like that. That's what will be, varying on an organization to organization basis. But I think a safe rule of thumb is up to or around a couple of months. And Rohit, I'll let you correct me if there's a better answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can give the consulting answer. It depends. So to be fair enough, we can start from 2 to 3 weeks to a couple of months, depending on the complexity of the invoices, because that's the critical part for the AI and also for your organizational workflow to bring into the system.
Okay, great. And the last question is there any limitation on the type of invoice format which we can use?
No limitation, absolutely no limitation on the invoice format. So we work with deep learning and the NLP that we keep hearing, that's the buzzword, but we have implemented that. So that means you can bring in the invoice format once the system is trained, can start recognizing the different data that lies within your invoices, or start recognizing what kind of data you want to process and what are the different invoice number, vendor number. So all those things can be captured by AI. So it's not restricted to an invoice format.
Great. So thanks, Rohit. Thanks, Russell. So I'll just give it a couple of seconds for if there are any more questions. And we're just 2 minutes away before the end of the session.
Okay. And I think there was a question on the recording, like so the question was, can you watch the recording again? So post the webinar, we'll be sending over the link of the recording to everyone. Is that right, Maddie? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
And while we're here, please take a moment to go to our LinkedIn page, give us a follow there. We're always not only innovating new solutions, but trying to offer up relevant, thoughtful thought leadership or articles or just, along the entire procurement and accounts payable processes and as it relates to ServiceNow. So come give us a follow, check out what we're up to, and we're happy to address any additional thoughts or questions offline after you come follow us on our page if you might see something that you're curious about.
So Rohit and Russell, there are no questions. So I would like to thank you for sharing how you can build a business case and what are the main KPIs which you need to measure, and also showcasing the ROI calculator in terms of how the team they can present to their management team and showcase the value both in terms of the time savings and the cost savings.
Excellent. Thank you for joining, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.